Hello, my friends. Agus FAILTE. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. You know, the highest grade of poet in early Ireland was required by law to have memorized, to know by heart, 350 tales, a huge body of poetry, and an unknown quantity of law and lore and tradition. These people were walking libraries, and I propose that we take a leaf out of their book and learn what I regard as one of the most essential bardic skills. My name is Kate Chadbourne. I'm a poet myself, a singer and a storyteller, and I'm also a professor of Irish language and folklore. And I run the Bardic Academy, which is a school for musicians and singers and poets, and the Celtic Wisdom School, where we learn Irish tradition with an eye to creativity and growing. Delicious. So I want to talk to you today about memorizing poetry. It's something that was a practice in my grandmother's time, and by the time I came along, it wasn't a practice at all. And I think today people would say, why memorize anything? You can just look it up. Well, I want to say first, why, and soon, how. So why? You know, years ago, Seamus Heaney came to Harvard and gave a talk, and he said that his father knew 2 poems and they were good for every occasion. That could be a wedding or a funeral. It could be a loss. It could be a gain, a moment of joy, a moment of sorrow. And I found that to be the truth as well. I also find that what we put in our minds becomes our tools for thinking. And the way we think really is the way we live. I also think that whatever we carry in our minds, our mental atmosphere becomes our life's atmosphere. So it's important that we decide sort of proactively what we're going to put in there. You know, I deliberately don't partake of certain kinds of news or movies or whatever because I don't really want those things in my mind. Where on the other hand, they're things I really enjoy having in my mind. So memorizing poetry and proverbs and stories and songs and all the things I love to carry in my mind gives me an active role in that. So I want to start by sharing just a snatch of a poem that I've had in my mind for a couple of decades that I think gives a good example of this. It's also an example of a place where I haven't memorized an entire poem. So this is Ulysses by Tennyson, and the actual poem is much, much longer. I've memorized the part that many people memorize, but you'll see why. It's so beautiful and it's so helpful. Let me just say it for you and then we can talk about it. So this is Ulysses, and just to set the scene, just to say, this is at the end of Ulysses' long journey, or well, maybe before they're setting out again, we'll say. The men have been journeying for a long time. And this is how Ulysses addresses them. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are now not that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, and though we are not that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Though much is taken, much abides. Often that's the part that comes to me, especially if there's something sad. You know, my beloved cat Mish died this spring. He was 17, so it's not a tragedy and it's of course expected, but I miss him so much. And we had 17 wonderful years together. But I have had to comfort myself, and that line of poetry, though much is taken, much abides, has been a great source of comfort. at any time, but definitely this spring. I'll also say that as I get older, as all of us get older, I think this poem is a great touchstone. And though we are now not that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, we are. I love that because it says no matter what is happening on the outside, no matter what changes have happened to our bodies, we are essentially ourselves. And we are magnificent, we are mighty, and let's remember that. So that's just one example of a poem that I come to again and again. I want to give you another poem quite unlike this one. So that poem is dated sort of 1833, 1842. I think those are both publication dates. Perhaps one is the writing date, the other is the publication date. I'm not sure. But here's one from a whole century later in 1923. And it's quite a cynical poem, but I enjoy the dickens out of it. I learned this poem as part of a whole body of poems by Edna St. Vincent Millay. And at the time when I learned it, I think I kind of needed it. I don't need it as much now, but I still enjoy it. Let me say it for you. I, being born a woman, and distressed by all the needs and notions of my kind, am urged by your propinquity to find your person fair, and feel a certain zest to bear your body's weight upon my breast. So subtly is the fume of life designed to clarify the pulse and cloud the mind, and leave me once again undone, possessed. Think not for this, though, the poor treason of my stout blood against my staggering brain, that I shall remember you with love, or season my scorn with pity. Let me make it plain. I find this frenzy insufficient reason for conversation when we meet again. Oof, wow, just white hot. I find this frenzy insufficient reason for conversation when we meet again. There's so much that is admitted in that and defied in that. Again, I don't need that so much now, but I still love the sense, that urge to self-possession that we hear in that poem of her saying, gracious, here I've gone again and done it, given myself away, and I don't plan to do that in the future. But it's a delight, anyway, to memorize a poem like that in a voice that I don't particularly want to emulate, but there's still pleasure in the language. So how do you memorize a poem? Just a couple quick notes. First, just go line by line. Choose something that you really want to be part of your mental furniture, that you really want to be part of your mental atmosphere. Don't feel obliged to pick, something that you think others would admire. Pick something you like. Just pick something you like. The poems in my head are such a motley crew. I just pick the ones that I like. Okay, so once you've chosen something, then just go line by line. Commit one line. Though much is taken, much abides. And chew on that for a little while. Or one or two lines if you feel you've got more capacity. Go for it. Something that really helps me is to read and reread the poem. I come back to it again and again. And this is not a chore, but a pleasure. Because as I come back to the poem, I learn so much more about it. I notice things, small things, the little words like and but and yet, the things like punctuation. I'll notice, oh goodness, actually, he used a semicolon there. That's interesting. Why? Instead of a full stop. And it gets me thinking more and more. And so actually reading and rereading the poem is an aid to memory, in my opinion. I also love to write the poem by hand, and I'll get stuck. I might start, though much is taken, much abides, and though we are now not that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven. I might get that far, and then I can't remember, and I'll go back. But I'll have written it down. Okay, now I know. Now try again and write the new part. it takes a little bit of effort, but honestly, as I love to say, what else are you going to do on planet Earth? It's a great thing to do, and the result is so worth it. Finally, I want to give one master tip. Stop saying you can't memorize things. Just stop saying it. Stop saying I have a bad memory or I can't memorize things. There is nothing that will prevent you from memorizing things more powerfully than saying those things. So you don't have to say I have a great memory, but just don't say that. I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson who said in one of his essays, "But have you tried?" And I think of that a lot, because so often when I have said, oh, I'm incapable of something, when I really look at it later, I think, but have you tried? And the answer is no, I haven't. I haven't made a concerted effort. And so this is well within the realm of possibility for every single one of us. So let's do it. It's fun. Now I want to give you a little poem that is fun to memorize. It could be perhaps a first poem or maybe just another poem for your bag. And this is also from 1923, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. Let me say it for you. And just as I say it, you'll notice that the first, second, and fourth line of every stanza rhyme. And the third line gives you the rhyme that you'll be using in the next stanza. So listen for that. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. These woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Isn't that a great poem? And again, so you can hear whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. Now, here's your new rhyme. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. Then that here turns into, my little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. Now the new rhyme is introduced. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. So lake is your new rhyme. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep, and that's our new rhyme, of easy wind and downy flake. Now the last quatrain, the last little four lines, there's no new rhyme, and they all rhyme, right? They all rhyme. So once you've got, these woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So I'd love to invite you, try your hand at that. See what you think. Maybe you know it already. Just wake it up. In my experience, the things that we've put in our brain, really, sometimes we lose them, or sometimes they seem to be lost. But if you just wake them up, they come back. So if you already know that poem, perhaps wake it up and say it this week. So I'd love to ask you this question. What poem would you like to tackle? You don't have to do it unless you want to, of course. But what would you love to put in your mind? What poem would you love to carry along with you that might provide you with some delight or some soothing or, I don't know, some wisdom in tough times or in good times or something to laugh at? Whatever you like. I would love to hear from you. Please share in the comments. What's a poem that you'd like to memorize? or a poem that you have memorized and love to carry around in your mind. And if you're not interested in doing this at all, perhaps answer this question: what would you like to exclude from your mental atmosphere in order to have it the way you like it? Or what would you like to include? So lots of things to think about, but really this is an opportunity for us to use memorizing poems as a way to really decide what sort of atmosphere we're going to live in our minds and hearts. So thank you as ever for watching. This is turning into be a little Bardic Academy masterclass of Bardic arts, and I'm so pleased. And thank you everybody who's been commenting, and thank you for your likes and subscriptions. Please, if you haven't, subscribe, join us here, like the video, share it with a friend. I know we're not the biggest crowd, perhaps, of poets and poetry-loving people, but we are mighty. And you know what? That which we are, we are. So thank you again, my friends. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye for now.